Now, a documentary film, I've talked about this on the air before, Positively False, Birth of a Heresy. Joan Shenton. Do we have Joan on the line, Tom? Can we get her up? You tell me if she's there still. Joan, welcome back.
Hello, Robert.
So nice to have you back on board live on the air all the way from England.
Wonderful to hear your voice.
Well, you've been doing such great work for so many years, and we should have Liam Scheff up with us in a while, too. But for now, your investigations and your documentary films, a lot of things appearing over the years on the BBC, really quite amazing that this story is still even needing to be covered with all of the, all of the atrocities exhibited or, let's say, visited upon those who have been claimed to be HIV positive over many years.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Actually, what happened was that last summer there was a conference in Vienna for AIDS dissidents during the same time as the World AIDS Conference. That was in June last year. And Christian Fiala, Dr. Christian Fiala, a very well-known and highly regarded obstetrician and gynecologist who works in Vienna, he organized the conference. And at the end of it, I had taken a few clips, over the 25 years that we've been making films about this subject and put them together and done a kind of history of the AIDS dissident movement looking back over 25 years. And he said at the end, why don't you do a documentary? And I was a bit taken aback because the thought of it terrified me, to be honest. And in fact, we started work in December last year. The co-producer is Andy Reese of Yellow Productions, and Medital, which was my little company. We got going on digitizing 60 hours of material from all sorts of different sources. It was high 8, it was mini DV, it was 1 inch, and it was, what else was it? DV.
Well, all the different formats, all brought into under one, and there's, whole historical documentation that has never been brought together to reveal even more like what House of Numbers has done, but even in a broader context.
Yeah, well, House of Numbers, of course, was a huge inspiration to me because I realized that Brent Leon had actually, if he'd managed it, and he traveled the world doing his, and it's really a very powerful documentary, I thought, well, I'd better do this with all this material before I disappear because, so I threaded it together I started writing on a plane on the runway in Heathrow when we were not able to fly. I was going to go and see my family in Perth, Western Australia, and the pilot said we couldn't leave because of the snow. So I just started writing. We were there 6 hours on the runway, and we were then sent home, and I couldn't go for 10 days. And I hid at home for those 10 days, which was right through Christmas, and started it off, because these things can be very daunting, as I'm sure you know.
Oh, absolutely. It's really, we're coming up against the entire old media complex. One that has suppressed information, that you have gotten out despite that Liam Scheff has written about extensively over the years as well. And we continue to voice here on the Robert Scott Bell Show in our 6 days a week broadcast now. We've been able to cover things. And we do an end around the old media. Many people would say, oh, if they would only cover it, if they would only, but listen, we can't wait around for that. Hell will freeze over by that time. Well,
yes, because I remember you did an interview with Celia and me and various other people all those years ago at the New York Rethinking AIDS conference.
Yes.
And you've been amazing. You've been at it for so long and good because, something, it was totally incredible to be in Lucerne at the Lucerne International Film Festival last week, never dreaming that we would be selected with such a hard topic. And we got selected for the Lucerne, and we went, Andy and I went, and we were nominated for Best Documentary, which was really thrilling. We went to the gala night, and we didn't win, but we came third.
Yeah, and not only that you were selected was stunning, much like House of Numbers gaining accolades, and usually they try to suppress this kind of thing, but you got special mention as well, and we're up for the main prize. Things are changing. There's I'm not here that we're yelling into the wind and hoping that something happens. Things are indeed happening. People are questioning like never before this whole issue of HIV causation.
This is true, and the younger generation are much more open to it. Not that they really think very much about the subject, but when they are asked to address it, they're very open about it, you know.
Do we have Liam Scheff up on the board there?
I'm here, and forgive me if it's a thready connection, but I'm hearing everything you're saying.
Hi, Liam.
Hey, Joan. I was listening to what you were saying about the difficulty, and there's been a difficulty certainly in presenting the information, mostly because the media has had no interest in presenting the information to the public. So when I started doing this journalism about 10 years ago, I was naive enough to think that if you told the truth, right? If you had witnesses and evidence and doctors and patients and drug inserts and all of this stuff, all you had to do was simply present it to the public, and they would come and say, "Oh, I didn't know that. We should consider that." How wrong was I, and what did you find when you were producing these great documentaries for?
I was absolutely flabbergasted because we had made some documentaries about pharmaceutical drugs that were dangerous, you know, and that were no longer needed. And we'd always, in a sense, reported these issues to our drug monitoring organizations like your FDA, and these drug companies had withdrawn drugs like clyoquinol, which was then Enterovir form, and strangely dangerous painkillers that shouldn't be around with dipyrone in them. And it was always, yes, this is amazing, they will be withdrawn. And this was just completely different. It was like saying God doesn't exist to a religious fundamentalist.
You bet, and when we come back on the Robert Scott Bell Show, hopefully Robert Scott Bell will be with us. We'll continue talking with Joan Shenton. This is Liam Scheff talking about AIDS.
All right, Robert Scott Bell back, rocking the health world with my good friends Liam Scheff and Joan Shenton. Positively False. Birth of a Heresy is the film, and I've got it linked to positivelyfalsemovie.com. Positivelyfalsemovie.com. There's also immunity.org.uk, and you'll see all of the links up at robertscottbell.com. Continuing the conversation with you guys. Hey, Liam, rock and roll. You took us to break beautifully.
I've had great instruction.
Yeah, you are a pro. Thank you for that. By the way, and Joan, it's great to have you back on board. And, you know, the idea of dissidence within the scientific realm, it's not new. It's happened, you know, in a lot of recorded history where we go to Galileo or otherwise, or whether we go to Ignaz Semmelweis, who says, wash your hands after cutting the cadavers to deliver babies. These are the kind of things that have been defended. And, you know, the people that have dared to go against the religious orthodoxy of modern medicine at the time have always been ostracized or worse, and it still is happening even today.
It is. The problem here in England is, or the UK as I should say, is that in the past, if we did a very powerful investigative documentary, as I was saying earlier to Liam, you could take the evidence to the monitoring agencies and they would take it in, because in those days they were funded by the government. Not that that is always a perfect solution, but nowadays they're funded by the very drug companies themselves. So when I took all the evidence about AZT that we gathered over 3 years to the Medicines Control Agency, as it was then called, they just said, thank you very much, goodbye. But, you know, because it's not in their interests to be attacked by the press when all their funding is from their members, and all their members are the pharmaceutical industry, and I wasn't a member.
Oh, yeah. Membership does have its privileges, but I think it strikes harshly on the soul, so to speak, as you have to sell out your humanity to be part of it. Liam, again, you've been attacked viciously in your investigative journalist history. You know firsthand.
I was. Thank you for bringing that up and rubbing. No, it's remain. I'm continually attacked viciously in fact. If you
William, we're losing your good link there through the web as well. Go ahead and disconnect, Liam, and try to reconnect. We'll continue on with Joan in the moment and get that better online. Joan, the idea that we can speak truthfully and freely in an open society, a society that welcomes questioning of dogma in a sense scientifically, we would think that would be a reasonable thing to ask, but it seemingly it is not even now today discussable in the open media.
Well, yes, it's Liam was about to describe obviously an incident or something that he had had. I can remember we, after AZT Cause for Concern, were taken to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission by an AIDS organization called the Terence Higgins Trust, and by several people and individuals who later we discovered were on AZT. And we were found guilty of being unfair in our treatment of the subject of AIDS at the Broadcasting Complaints Commission. And a huge kind of not apology, but a huge, this had to be publicized by Channel 4. It didn't do us any good. And, that was a very, very unpleasant situation, because we thought we had some really important evidence to put forward, and we did. And the editor of Dispatches, Channel 4, who commissioned us, he went into the commission and came out and said, it's like winning a football match 9-0 and being told you've lost.
Incredible. Liam is back with us. Liam, thanks for bearing with the Internet scrubs that we have to do from time to time.
Yeah, right. What Joan is saying is true. It doesn't matter how much data you have. There's the church, and the Church of AZT and the Church of AIDS says that nothing ever must be said against the church. And this is the same as, of course, the medieval Christian church. There's really no difference in structure.
It's an amazing thing to consider, and a lot of people have not been exposed, if they follow the old media, to recognize that there is an orthodoxy within a lot of the, let's say, religious or cult-like dogma within the church of cancer or any of the neurological diseases. Any of these things have their limiting strictures and dogma that if you question them, suddenly, for instance, we bring up the issue of toxicology, that the people with immune deficiencies around the world share some level of toxic influx, and if we share the concept or context of nutritional deficiencies around the world, immune deficiencies in any number of diseases linked to deficiencies of many different nutrients, and we go into sanitation, hygiene, etc. Now you're basically busting up the drug everything that moves paradigm of that church.
Again, the mainstream here gets literally tens of millions of dollars to run studies with drugs which have already failed. The drugs are already failures. They rerun the studies. But if you come along as a journalist and say, well, you killed 100,000 people, is it okay now? Can we now verify or validate that it was correct? They offer no apology. The John P. Moores of the world at Weill Cornell Medical Center, who's received tens of millions to do studies with poor Africans, and the idea is to give them drugs when they're not sick, to put drugs on them while they're having sex. I'm not joking. When you encounter somebody like this, you think they should be accountable, but they're immune to criticism and they hide. They then get the place right in front of the footlights in the theater. They go to the New York Times and they get to write editorials. They're not even checked. There's no fact-checking when you're in the AIDS mainstream. When you're a journalist like Joan and you dot your I's and cross your T's and make the little curly Q things on your Q's, and it's all in order, and you've got all of the validating information. These guys who don't have anything checked, who are worshipped by the idiot press, the New York Times, for example, the pharmaceutical press, get to rain all over your parade in public and call you terrible names. Well, this, fortunately, has been changing, but this is what Joan has been up against.
Yeah, it continues even to this day, Joan, does it not?
Yes, it's true. It just is amazing. There was going to be a screening in London of Brent's film, House of Numbers, last year, and it was all set up by the Spectator magazine. And then, of course, at the last minute it was cancelled. So you can't rely on anything. I can remember when my book came out, I was invited onto 2 very prestigious, book shows on the BBC. And I was so excited. And the researcher rang and said, okay, now tell me who I should ask to come on against you. Yes. So I said, you're going to find a terrible problem finding somebody.
Yeah, well, hold on, Joan. We got to take a break here. More with Joan Shenton and Liam Scheff, investigative journalist, on the issue. Positively False, Birth of a Heresy is a documentary film. We're talking about causation of immune deficiency. That's called AIDS. We've got that and more coming up on the United States and World of Health Talk Radio here, the Robert Scott Bell Show. More than anywhere else in media, over the many years I've been in broadcast media, we've been covering the AIDS controversy about the claim as the pharmaceutical medical industrial complex had that there is a retrovirus, seemingly invincible and stealth and invisible, that would kill everybody. Of course, it never turned out that way, and it turned out that even the medical community had to admit that the initial phases, certainly during the 90s, the AZT was the prime reason that people so-called diagnosed as having AIDS or HIV had died due to pharmaceutical interventions. This is not new, except they tried to portray it as something that was new and different. But we come back to the principles like the law of the terrain and understand that the whole idea that a retrovirus could indiscriminately or discriminately, whatever, know what your sexual orientation is, how much money you make, where you live, what continent or not. I mean, it's absurd on so many levels, but we have a lot to do still to overcome it all these years later. Joan Shenton is helping us do that with her documentary film on the subject matter. And, of course, Liam Scheff has been writing about it for years, my dear friend, both investigative journalists. And, Joan, we were talking a little bit about on the break as far as where we wanted to go and talking about the things that are unmentionable in the old media.
Yes. In fact, I was talking to Liam in the break about several things, but I am reminded now of something that's important to say, because it links to what you just said about the test. We did a small study ourselves for Channel 4 some years back now. And we must have taken 42 samples of blood from people with varying conditions, and we got 19 anomalies on our test. I'm not going to go into the detail about how we did it, but we blinded the test and we went through London University and Surrey University and it was all above board, and we got 19 anomalies. Including, for example, in a set of people with high proteins in their blood, IgG and IgM, with no AIDS-defining conditions, we got a dead cert positive in the 5 that we had that were like that. So 1 in 5 we discovered had tested positive with no AIDS-defining conditions. They just had high proteins in their blood. So, all this evidence is never really studied or published.
Yeah, in addition, the whole idea that this was a sexually transmitted disease never even panned out either, because globally, the worldwide so-called prostitute community was not getting AIDS, is still not getting AIDS or the so-called HIV.
Of course not. I may have said this before, but there was a study at St Mary's Hospital just round the corner from me here in London of 250 prostitutes over 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, they found only 3 positive ones, and all 3 were intravenous drug users. 2 of them were in good health, and 1 was in bad health. So they stopped funding the study.
They just stopped there?
Yeah, because they said there's not enough evidence to show that the person, it was being funded by by the foundation of a large supermarket chain.
Well, like Waitrose or something?
Like that, but I think it was Sainsbury's. I can't remember the exact name of the one. Yeah, and they just stopped giving the money because they said, well, there's no point.
Oh, my goodness. Now, your documentary film, Positively False, Birth of a Heresy, is this only available by online? Can we listen? How do we see it here in the States? So a lot of my listeners who are here in the United States would want to see this documentary film. Will there be showings? Can people buy it? What's the status?
Actually, I'm sorry to say at the moment, Robert, it's not available. It will be, but we are doing the circuit of festivals, and until we've done that, which can take up to 9 months, festivals don't like you to make it all available on DVD. Okay. Eventually it will be available, no doubt, but not immediately.
All right, so when we come back from this break, we'll do one more segment here with Joan Shenton. We'll see if we can bring Liam up, but we're having problems with the audio there. But that's it, live radio, you know. That's what we do here, the Robert Scott Bell Show. Rock that health world globally as well. And I appreciate you being here, Joan. Stay with me another segment. And robertscottbell.com for all of the links to today's news, the way you should read it. We're going to be right back. Joan Shenton continues on one more segment here. Positively False, Birth of a Heresy is a new documentary film. We've got it linked up at positivelyfalsemovie.com. Joan, are you finding, though, as we are here, more people outside of the orthodoxy open and receptive to these messages and this information?
Yes, I am. I'm finding it, although young medical students are very hostile still, because you see the textbooks, all of them now just say categorically that this is the situation, that HIV causes AIDS. And there is absolutely no question about it. So it's quite hard to argue with that group of the younger generation. But with others and with older people now, you can talk about it, and they don't sort of rise in shock and horror.
Yeah. Well, you know, there were a lot of problems with the belief system surrounding HIV causing AIDS, because at the early stages it was going to kill you in a year or 2 or 5, and it went to 10 and 15, 20, and then you started having the problem of all these people who had been given HIV positive tests that were alive 20, 25, almost 30 years later, not on any drugs, and they've had to pretend those people don't exist.
Well, you see, that is really interesting, and I would love it if you could gather some of those people together through your radio program, because I had wanted to feature at the end of the film, and it's a gallery of what I used to call long-term survivors, but on Facebook we started quite a good discussion about it, because Brian Carter said you shouldn't use long-term survivor, it would be better, and then we thought of long-term non-progressive, but that's the term used by the orthodoxy, and then survivors and thrivers came out. But it's very difficult to gather information about them, because some people have, of course, taken the drugs for short periods of time and maybe been helped by them. After all, some of the protease inhibitors for short periods of time have qualities of they're antimicrobial, antimycotic, antibiotic, anti-inflammatory, and antiseptic. So, it could do you a lot of good if you take them for a short period of time. But the thing is, giving them for lifelong therapy in the way that no cancer treatment would ever be given, because the virus is going to get you if you stop taking them for a day, is what creates the most terrible side effects in some people. And you probably know more about it than I do, but, what they call Crick's belly and sort of a massing of fat, camel's hump, I think, on the shoulders. Tissue.
Yeah, you've got serious drug toxicity issues, and we cover this in every ailment and every disease. I've got some more stories about that in the coming hour. But this is something that is not going away. It's only becoming more and more obvious. Liam writes in, people with AIDS drugs die, people with HIV positive and no drugs live. What did AZT do to the death rate from 10,000 to 50,000 per year? Protease inhibitors, you talk about taking them for short bursts, but eventually they become very toxic as well, as with all of these medicines. Yeah, you can say, I'll do a study for 2 weeks, and you'll say, look, things are going well. If you go for 2 months or 2 years, and you realize how toxic it is.
That's true. And I really don't know what the best thing is in those situations. Whether a short burst is going to be helpful or not, that would need to be more carefully studied.
Well, nobody is suffering on planet Earth from a toxic, let's say, FDA here in the U.S. Approved drug deficiency, right? None of these are essential elements, essential nutrients. And, of course, we look at the body differently as a homeopath. I mean, I'm working from a different starting point than these drug doctors that don't recognize toxicology as a prime cause of any kind of, deficiency, supplemental, immune, or otherwise. So we have a crisis of a starting point of a fundamental religious church or dogma that is based on these synthetic chemicals, and all we need to do is find the right combination of them to kill the bad guy that we can't find, that we can't prove exists, and that we can't test for.
Very well said. Yeah.
Yeah, how does HIV cause AIDS? Liam writes, destroys T cells. No, it doesn't destroy, but stimulated the immune system. No, it's a Trojan horse. And like the other particles in the body, there's no theory for how any one of the particular causes cause AIDS. But we know how immune deficiency occurs. Joan Shenton, bless you, my lovely lady. Yeah, you were so wonderful for all that you do.
Thank you, Robert. So are you.
Oh, well, thanks. We'd love to have you back on soon, and as this thing breaks open with a movie available everywhere, we'll bring it back online here. So thank you again, Joan Shenton. Thank you again, Liam Scheff.